Good morning. I'm Jason.
And I'm Josh, and welcome to DBA Insights. Today we have a guest with us, Lakeisha Wilson, and we'll be going over chapters 1 through 3 of the dissertation process. Hey, Lakeisha, you want to give a quick background of yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I am a program administrator with the University of Maryland, Baltimore. Have over 18 years working in the industry as a practitioner in healthcare administration.
Perfect. So Lakeisha, what is your dissertation topic?
Oh my goodness. I went back and forth, just being in healthcare. My passion was, working in healthcare. I was attending so many meetings. I go to another meeting and it's always a new change that was coming down. And then after a while, I got a little tired and I noticed that my colleagues, turnovers and things like that. So I decided to focus on change fatigue. And I expanded it a bit with conversations from my mentors and not just focusing on healthcare, viewing healthcare as a regulated industry. So regulated industries, drowning in white water. And I'll define what white water is in a moment. And just doing a systematic review on managing change fatigue and how can we develop employees to be resilient. That's one of the things that we found in the literature that's out there that has been proven that when one has resilience, they can be able to work through changes that are occurring constantly.
Gotcha. And was this again a topic you've always been interested in? Did your mentor kind of help shape it, or for the past 2.5, 3 years, you're like, I'm doing this?
Yeah, I think I came into the program with the understanding that I wanted to work on. Initially, I was focused on burnout. Burnout has been researched so much that people are burned out from researching burnout, right? But burnout, I would argue, initially research as sort of a diagnosis tied to nursing, tied to a very, defined population or workforce group. However, this is sort of bridging it a little bit. I acknowledge that change fatigue can be a symptom of burnout. However, change fatigue can stand on its own. And I talk about that in my research as I'm diving into the literature.
What's some of the new literature that's out there on change fatigue? What's like the most pertinent or most relevant?
Well, it's affecting my research. I'm pretty sure it's affecting others' research right now. The new literature on change fatigue is focusing around COVID, right? So, with the pandemic, change. It was daily news updates, globally, right? Put a mask on, take it off, you wear it on an airplane or, do all these different steps that was changing weekly and in some cases daily. So that type of that information in literature around change fatigue is there as well. However, I am trying to group that and address that very separately from what I want to look at from operations and change fatigue due to regulations that agencies or government agencies are making for industries, whether it's the FDA, whether it's something that the CDC is making. These are things that these agencies make all the time. The pandemic just exasperated that, a step further.
Right.
So, probably jumping again, we're kind of around chapter 1 right now, maybe a little chapter 2, but I'm going to jump ahead real quick to chapter 3. So, when you chapter 3 methods, we've got our inclusion and exclusion criteria, right? When we're conducting our search strategy. So, are you like exclude COVID-19, or how are
Yeah.
when you're actually getting into that, how are you doing that?
Yeah, no, I'm actually including it because I'm dedicating a component to that because I don't think I can even talk about change fatigue without speaking how the COVID-19 has affected that as well, right? It's across all industries. And I think that, regulated industries dealing with change fatigue is a problem anyway. So in addition to that, with the COVID-19 change fatigue layer on top of that, it is being addressed. So to answer your question, yes, I did include that in my inclusion criteria. However, the way that I am synthesizing that data will be pulled out very separately.
Hmm. So
Okay.
what looking at your topic and your development? Well, okay. So chapter 1 we want to discuss the management problem, and the management problem basically is you're focused on change fatigue. How did you specifically define change fatigue?
Yeah, so change fatigue, and I have a terminology. So it's
Well,
emotional
in lay
exhaustion.
terms is fine too.
Yeah,
You
no,
know,
that's fine.
yeah.
It's an emotional exhaustion. I have been in management for quite some time, and I've seen it in my employees' faces.
Mhm.
Sometimes, we get things, and we have to make adjustments around those things. And you're just in a room and you're talking to your employees who work ethics. They're showing up. They're there. They're there to do the work. However, I have to implement yet another change, which is huge, which requires for people to adjust and adapt and do a whole number of additional things in their job duties. And it's happening on a frequent basis. And eventually, employees, they get tired of that. They get emotionally exhausted from it and they look for other jobs where change isn't happening so frequently. So now, we have this increased turnover. So the goal really to managing change fatigue, what we're really talking about is how do we retain employees? The purpose is we don't want them to leave. This is a reason that people are leaving jobs. They're tired of the changes, especially where in some cases we aren't transparent enough in leadership to explain why changes are occurring. So transparency is something that's going to be addressed in my research as a tool to aid in managing this. So, people have a better understanding of why something is occurring. So, in tying that into, COVID, when we were looking at these news updates, when we was first hearing about, vaccine, how can you make it in like, a month, whatever. But, they had a lot of informational updates, right? For society, quite frankly. And if one followed all of those updates, one could be very well informed as to the hows and whys, right? It was very, very much, shared with us. So for some people, those hesitancies, were removed and they were able to adapt to the changes in their life, whether that's wearing a mask, whether that was staying in the house in quarantine or on vacation or whatever, they were able to receive that a little better. So we're looking at that in the literature in organizations as well as being transparent and perhaps that affecting people's ability to be able to manage that change a little better.
Okay, just a follow-up question from number one, talking about change fatigue, the definition. What did you see really in the literature? Was it like, uh, wow, I'm an employee, change is happening so fast, I don't like it, I'm out of here? Or is it like,
Yeah, there was some
is there
case
resistance
studies.
to change
Say it
based on
again.
like a resistance factor to change? Like,
Yes.
people are like, oh, things are changing around here so fast, I'm not changing at all. I'm just going to do
Yeah.
what I do, kind of thing.
Actually, yes, the resistance to change, which speaks to the turnovers. So you have people that are going to just check the boxes. So one thing about, organizational change management is that it needs to work, right?
Right.
You have to get it to the stage where you're implementing, right? And then there's a stage where you're reviewing it to see if it was effective. Did it work? And what we're finding is that most organizations spend so much time coming up with the change plan, and they're failing at the implementation model. Why wasn't it successful? And so many resources go into these developments. And then there's another one. And then there's
Is there
another
a
one.
loss in transfer of knowledge, you think, from the planning stage to the actual implementation stage of
Yes,
change?
because in order to implement it, you have to implement it across all workers. So your frontline workers, your midline managers, everyone has to have buy-in into the process, right? And we're finding that if you have employees with change fatigue, that buy-in is not there. So they're not necessarily doing all the steps, they're surface touching, or they may just be what we call checked out. And it's similar to, the thinking process of the bad apple, depending on the type of structure you have or the work groups and teams that employees are working in. But if you have that person that is checked out in that work group, then that mentality, that behavior can possibly be picked up by someone else. So then you have failures at different steps in this, change plan to push things forward. So it's really a huge management problem. And the literature is pointing us in a direction of not focusing so much on the planning of it and leaving out, middle line or frontline employees from the conversation. Introduce it early when you're thinking about it. Make sure they're understanding, the reasons that we're thinking about, the reasons that it's occurring, gather their input, so they can feel like they're a part of the change that's being, pushed forward.
So we've talked about, sounds like some of the background research, maybe some of the scoping research, and I hear change. I'm hearing change a lot, right? Of course. So you aligning that through a certain theoretical lens to a certain theory, like how are you incorporating the literature on, the past literature on change into your research?
So there's 3 different theories that I'm using right now. I did get approved for 3 different theories. So we have the transition model for change by William Bridges, which was introduced in the 90s, which is sort of it's a what do you call it? A spectrum, if you will, of change. Sort of when it's first introduced, you're ending, you're letting go, you're adapting from an old system. Midway through that, you're sort of neutralizing out. You're realizing that new change is coming. And then at the end of that, you're sort of picking up on the change that was introduced, the new beginning. And that's sort of the spectrum that I'm working within. And then the other 2 theories, the KI theory and the resilience theory, is layered together and has some overlap. With resilience theory, it speaks to employees being resistant to change and talking about safe environments for employees. These 2 theories in the literature are very separate. I'm bringing them together in my research and seeing how I can utilize this in my findings as I'm going through the literature to see if I find, some ways that they're comparable to each other with this model. This model is not finalized. However, I do want to make sure that I'm saying that. But right now, it seems to be working out right now. And as I'm stepping through the literature, it's making sense.
Okay. I see that the theory looks interesting to walk through, but I mean, I'm interested how you're meshing all 3 of those together, and that's and how, I mean, that took some time to put all those.
Yes, there's a more defined variable process that I'm going through now, because I kind of want to have that broken down as granular as I can, right? Because I want to think about this as I'm reading through the literature and coding, picking up on these variables and seeing commonalities across the 2 theories. With Bridges, with his transition model, I think that is sort of my base, right? Just for general conversation, we can all agree change is a transition. Yes, you have to let go of the old, that's reset, prepare for the new. That's pretty, to me, that's your base. Is the adapter and innovator creativity component in the KAI theory, which basically identifies employees that are more creative, the ones that are innovators, and kind of pulling them out and playing to that skill set. And that theory is basically saying, if you identify these employees, these are your leaders. These are the ones you really want to anchor in change. They're going to be the ones to help the other employees cope better, right? Yeah, and if you think about it in management, before when managed operations introduce systems, there's normally a team lead or a super user, the same type of thinking, right? With this model. And the resilience theory talks about developing resilient employees, the ones that are resistant to change. So if I take my innovators, my adapters, and I tag them with my ones that are a little resistant, the thought is, and this is what I'm thinking, the
Right.
thought is the ones that are resistant aren't going to be as resistant. I don't think that we're going to completely remove, right, those people who are resistant, because in some cases, you're just not going to be able to be that effective, right? 100%. However, I do think it's going to potentially be effective in thinking about the theories in that way. But again, I have to look at the research. That's the way I'm thinking, or I'm hoping that the modeling should work.
Or the group dynamic would help,
Hmm.
facilitate whatever change you're trying to do, or
Yeah.
uh,
It's
yeah.
kind of like when when you're in breakout groups and you normally don't want to assign all the strong people to one group, right? It's like you want to, give it a balance. And this is sort of the way I'm looking at these two theories and trying to have one offset the other.
You guys were in a couple groups, a powerhouse group during summer.
I was about to say, is that why they always separated us? No, just kidding.
Right. Yeah. No, but I haven't really dived into, just writing the method section. I haven't even really, initiated the coding process yet. I'm just still organizing and structuring. There's a lot that goes into that. And I think setting it up the right way initially before even starting to code is key for the different layers that I'm looking at. So it's just me organizing my articles and the way I'm storing them and and Mendeley and then transferring them to Atlas. And it just takes time. The
It
time
takes a lot of
management
time.
component
Yeah.
is very huge. And I'm expecting to over the summer to really be able to start that process, get into that process. I think I'll have my framework really set up for me to just kind of, step through it. And I can really kind of what I call peel back that onion and kind of see what's in that literature.
Oh, speaking to your methods, yeah, how did your search string strategy go? Like, I mean, how many times
Oh,
did you have to develop search strings with the librarian, and
yeah, it
was there a
went.
lot of information returned after the first version?
No, no. So
Okay.
the issue is that, regulated industries, you know, I wanted, so initially I said I was focusing on my experience has always been in healthcare. So I wanted to expand it across other regulated industries. Well, to my surprise, other regulated industries has not focused on change fatigue. Although they're regulated, although, there are some, similarities there, that much literature is not there. So, as we all learning, um, not finding something as a finding. So I'm speaking to that in my findings,
Mhm.
right? I really was surprised because I really was focused on aviation. I just thought it has to be change fatigue in aviation. How
Right.
many times do you show up at the airport and your flight is, oh my goodness, here we go again, it's canceled. This is the life of aviation, right? It has to be change fatigue. It has to be there. Well, it's not. So it's very
It's not
limited. So I was
reported on,
surprised.
right? It's not being
Yeah, I was
reported
just surprised. The articles that I did find were specific to change fatigue from pilots, and that's not what I'm interested in. I'm not interested in it, from that level, from like and that is included. I speak to that in my exclusion. So, like for the healthcare, I'm not speaking to the physician hours or their on-call hours and scheduling and shift work. That is excluded. I am speaking to change fatigue from policies and changes in general and operations. So the same thing with aviation. What I was finding was the pilot flight data, them flying so many hours, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe found one or two articles in general, but not enough for me to be able to say, that I can do a systematic review specifically and speak
right.
to that from, aviation industry as a regulated industry. So I'll be speaking to that in my findings. So with that being said, although I'm speaking to that, the bulk of my literature is in healthcare. I will be speaking to the need for more research in the other regulated industries. Again, another surprise was Food and Drug Administration. My goodness, every time you're looking at a commercial, something is recalled. Right now
So,
in the news in the US, it's formula, right? Operation Baby Formula, the changes around that. So again, surprise, I'm not finding it in the literature. So just speaking to those things as a finding that it's not there.
And a quick question for you, Lakeisha. I heard you mention systematic review, right? So that is what we're doing, right? As part of our, our dissertation, we're doing a systematic review. Could you speak to that a little bit more? And Jason, chime in. I mean, I'll chime in too, but
Sure. Systematic review is not easy. I think it's one of the cornerstones of qualitative research. We're able to review research studies, primary research meta-analyses, and you're doing it in a very systematic way, right? It has to be able to be replicable. So one has to be able to come behind what you've done and follow your steps and get the same, I'm going to say, raw results, not necessarily your conclusions and discussions around how you categorize what you found in the literature. However, they should be able to land on the same literature that you've landed on for you to come to your opinions that you've come to, or what we call evidence, the same literature or evidence, right? Systematic review is born out of evidence-based management. Evidence-based management is basically research that has been done in management, in the management discipline rather, that gives us the tool of, rigor, transparency, and just the design, being able to speak to the type of research design that's done in a systematic review. There are specific steps involved that when one is conducting a systematic review is very respected if it's done correctly. There is the Prisma, I think, which is, to me, the Prisma is the, I'm not gonna say the advertisement or the commercial to the systematic review, but it really is. It kind of speaks to, you can really put so many things on a Prisma. And, the Prisma is not just, what databases you're searching for, what articles. If you're really doing a Prisma and you've really read up on how Prismas are used, the way that tool is utilized, you're really explaining why you included something, why you excluded something, why was this database chosen? Okay, you landed on X number of articles, and from that, you reviewed this many number of abstracts, but this many landed, officially you get down to your finite number of what you're actually using for, ta-da, your data set, right? So we have really, it's kind of like a qualitative way to me, and this is how I'm thinking about it, actually, as I'm talking. It's a qualitative way of arriving at one, if one was to look at something statistically, and you get to your, what is it called? The significance. To me, it's a way of explaining the significance of your data set and how you've done it in this transparent way.
Right. And that's why that exclusion criteria is so important to develop before running anything through Prisma.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So my inclusion criteria, English articles, and it's like, oh, you find good articles and you're like, oh, this is not, how do I get it? And, and I'm focused on regulated industries in the US. So that's another thing. So I'm only including articles for companies that are operating in the US. I want to make sure I'm clear about that. So it can be a foreign company, but if they're operating in the US, which falls under US policies and guidelines for operating here, then they were included.
Go ahead.
One
thing I wanted to note about systematic reviews is, we're doing dissertation work, so we have to, be very precise on the literature that we select to include in our final data set for a systematic review. Normal systematic reviews, if you're doing something for publishing, you could actually use gray literature and other literature like that you can incorporate, that it doesn't have to be, solely set on the one. They want you to incorporate more from the readings that I've done. But
I think for the whole weight, I think for a dissertation, you want your literature that you're selecting to have a good peer reviewed, scholarly, respected body of work. There's some pieces out there. There's different types of literature that are out there, periodicals, there's plenty of those out there, right? But what I found with some of those, they come across as to-dos, recommendations. You don't necessarily, when you're really, we've all went through the classes of learning how to sort of basically tear apart an article. When you're reviewing some of them, it's kind of like, well, how did you come to that? Well, what makes this recommendation? Or you gave me 20 tips of how to develop my employees. How did these tips come about? So I am understanding why these type of articles are not necessarily guarded as good ones to use for dissertation, because you don't have the reference points of how they landed there. It seems very opinion driven, very on the job, learned these type of things work for us at company X. But some of them don't speak to the transferability of these to other organizations, and what works for yours will work for mine, and the research behind it. Whereas, of course, the scholarly journals do that. And they do, in some cases, point out things that is necessarily a problem or an issue or requires further research. Yeah. I'm having fun. Initially, I was just like, oh, I don't know. This is just, maybe I've taken on too much, but I'm actually enjoying it. And I think because I'm doing it, this is so close to what I do, at work. And I can't tell you the amount of change that we receive all the time. And I am sometimes the messenger that has to deliver this lovely news and figure out things and, how to do things. And this is very close to home for me. So I'm enjoying it and I'm learning some things.
Well, as we're getting ready to wrap up here, one of the things in our dissertation work that I'm not sure if past generations had to do it, but the inclusion of SMEs, subject matter experts. What are your thoughts on that? Yay? Nay? Are you doing it?
I think I like it. However, to me, I'm not interested in the hybrid model. So to me, if I was to do subject matter experts, based on the literature, that is very specific type of interviewing. The questions that I'm asking have to be developed in a certain way. I should probably have more than one. One subject matter expert doesn't get to necessarily dictate, their experience is relative. However, it's one. So normally when that is introduced into research, is for primary research. There's several of them. There's groupings of them based on the discipline. And their answers, are coded in such a way, to those type of questions that's being asked to them. And I get it. I understand that it's a blended model a little bit here, with that being an option to add on to say, in addition to the systematic review, the subject matter expert can be complementary to that. However, I've decided not to utilize that in my research, but I understand it.
Interesting.
One kind of just general DBA question. Do you have any, we're hoping that someday, we'll have other DBA students viewing these podcasts. Do you have any, like, I've got a couple pieces of advice, right? Whenever I talk to students, like in residency, like, what are a couple of the big things, like, you wish you had done, you wish you had knew, you would just tell a DBA 800 or was it 600 student today?
Yeah.
Organize your files. I can't tell you how I've been trying to find my thumb drive. Like, where is that file? I remember reading it. I remember I had that article. It all comes full circle. And it's interesting because we've heard that. I heard that in 600, where they said, it's going to come full circle. And it does. So that organization is key from the very beginning. Don't treat it like an undergrad or a master's course where you're just kind of getting to the end. Okay, next, throw out that file. It all is a piece to the puzzle. So I do regret it. I've spent additional time looking for things or reaching out to colleagues to say, can you send me this? Remember this? And, and they have it. So organization to me would be key. I know people heard about time management, but I'll take it a step further and say, it's not just time, it is time management and productivity management. I have put time on my calendar where I have literally just sat here and not been productive. Okay, so Lakeisha puts time on her calendar for the class, and I try to dedicate at least 25 hours a week. So it's on my calendar to at least log on. However, I'm not doing what I need to do. I'm not having concentrated thinking productivity time. So I found myself just struggling, and I'm thinking, what's the problem? So I had to really make sure that I was being productive. I was really in my concentration. I was really not distracted. I did not, lose focus, or I did not do something that I thought, oh, I don't want to deal with the methods today. Let me just go back and do my edits from chapter 1. No, today is methods day.
Yeah.
Get it done. So just having those type of pep talks with myself, I started to do better.
That's key, is not just setting aside the time, but actually producing and being productive during those hours.
Yeah.
Tough. It's tough to manage.
It's tough. And I found that I'm better at, I'm not submitting close to, I'm normally ahead. And I'm finding that that's good, because I'm finding, just like I tell I work with researchers. Funny thing, I work with researchers who submit grants, and I always tell them, if you're still writing and the grant is due at 5 o'clock, and I'm telling you, give me the grant at 4 to submit, and you're still writing, it's not ready. So the same thing with myself, right? If something is due and it's due at midnight and I'm still scrambling like at 10, 11, I got to still write this, it's not ready. So that means I didn't do the right preparation ahead of that. So I've corrected some of those flaws very early on, so I'm not in that situation.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. I know, like, for me, our cutoff is right Tuesday night. But like, if I'm not like just doing one last quick review on Tuesday, then I messed up somewhere, right? Like, if I'm scrambling, then on Tuesday to get something in, I need to tweak it for next week, and I've had to do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd call it procrastinating, but better managing my time. Both you said time management, but also we're talking about that family time management, like finding time to spend with your family. And then back to like 600. I know I had a talk with my wife from when I had first joined the program. Look, for these 3 years, we're not going to be able to do stuff on Saturday mornings. So setting those expectations within time management with your family. And that was kind of a big thing.
Or getting your mind. I'm someone, me and I'm here, just me and my daughter. She's a teenager, but we're very normal. I've normalized having the laptop in my lap. So she has the TV on. I've normalized it so much that I see her with her laptop in her lap on Sunday with me. And I'm like, what are you working on? I'm just going to read up on some things, So my behavior has trained her behavior. So I've just normalized, this is what mommy does. I'm always on the background somewhere on the computer. This is what I'm doing. Right. Because that's how you have to do it. If you can blend it in sometimes. For some families that can work. And for some, I know with the little kids, that's not necessarily feasible to do. And you have to kind of block it out. But I've been able to do a better blend in my household. Yeah.
Well, that's great, Lakeisha. Thank you for joining us today.
Yes, this has been fun. I'm so excited for you guys' podcast.
Yeah, like I said again, again, thanks for joining us. I don't know, do we have any additional closing thoughts, Jason?
No, pretty good.
Yeah,
include
awesome.
This in the clip for when we really. Oh, sorry. For when we do the video for graduation. There you go. See, I'm very excited. Yeah. Well, thank you guys.
Yep, thank you. I'm Josh.
I'm Jason.
And we'll see you all next time. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.